All right, good morning, Powerhouse and Dreammakers. We got some Dreammakers on this morning. We've got Nick with Prime Corporate Services. Guys, I'm excited for y'all to be on this morning and put it in the chat and say thank you so much to Nick because he's jumping on, I think, at 6:30. It could be 5:30. I don't know. He'll probably tell us in a second. The time that he's jumping on this morning to kind of go over the nitty gritty and the meat and potatoes about Prime and blessing us with some good information on taxes. But guys, like I said, I'm super excited to have y'all on tonight or to listen. Is it morning or night? Because I had a late night. I didn't get home till midnight last night, field training a new agent in Charleston. But guys, I want you to hear from them and kind of take in some of the ways that they can help, some of the things that we take for granted or we get in the business and we start, thinking about making commissions, recruiting and, selling policies, but the tax side of that, the business structure, the ways that we can save more of our income, we kind of forget about. And so I want you to hear from them, what they offer. And then basically today we'll talk about how to structure your business the right way to keep more of what you earn. The biggest financial mistakes that agents can make, smart tax strategies, and how to legally minimize what you owe, and then how to set yourself up for long-term financial success. So without further ado, Nick, do I have you?
Yes. How are we, Laura? Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good night. I think I distracted you a little bit with the dark
Start.
background. It's still a little bit dark out here. It's 6:30 out here though, so we're all good. I'm used to getting up at that 5:30 type of hours. So this is perfect. I'm excited to kick the day off with your community. So I appreciate you guys having me. Let me share my slides first and foremost, then we'll just kind of dive. I just requested access, Laura, on
All
your end
right.
as well.
Gotcha.
All right, perfect. Okay, so Nick Bulis, Prime Corporate Services. The first thing that I want to do is just quickly give you guys a 10,000-foot view of who we are at Prime Corporate Services, right? So we're a comprehensive business firm that in a large part focuses on three different areas, right? So the first area of emphasis is on the legal side with our attorneys that oversee, roughly speaking, about 65,000 corporate structures on an annual basis. So entity creation, LLCs, S Corp, C Corp, you name it, we do all corporate structures. And that is going to be a vocal point of what it is that we're going to be discussing today. We're going to make sure that you all have a great understanding how to have the max asset protection, above all, the max tax advantages, as well as the maximum privatization. And the second facet is the financial end of the spectrum, right? So we have financial advisors that will make sure that you have a complete understanding how to get away from being the personal banks to your business. Most individuals aren't aware of this, but we actually have two federally sanctioned credit profiles, right? So we'll make sure that you have an understanding how to get away from being the personal bank to the business. And then last, to Laura's point, tax mitigation, right? As crazy it is, we're already upon tax season. So we're going to make sure that you guys have a good understanding around record keeping, itemizing, as well as what you can expect as far as returns go with a properly implemented tax strategy. Right, so personal taxes, business taxes, corporate taxes, bookkeeping, you name it, we do it. Right, so those are going to be the three areas of focus. We are going to primarily speaking focus on one of them. Now, the other reason why I'm as excited as I am to be here is we have a bunch of agents on here, right? So for the most part, I'm assuming the majority of you guys, at least on the facet of the agent side of things, are 1099 independent contractors. So I can guarantee that by the end of this, every single one of you will have the ability of at minimum saving at least 20% on your taxable income. So that means if you make 100,000 right out of the gate, you're only going to be taxed on 80. If you bring in 50 right out of the gate, you're only taxed on 40. Okay, now for those of you that maybe are new to the agent side of things and you still have conventional full-time W-2 employment, this might sound like a paradox at the moment, but it'll make sense. And I'll bring it full circle here shortly. But where you may actually have the most to gain this very moment from a proper corporate structure is with your personal taxes, right? And believe it or not, you can all make money with this endeavor just by the amount of money that you're going to save on your personal taxes. So we're going to make sure we touch base on all fronts. Now, the first thing we need to do is get you all up to speed with the tax reform, right? And make sure that you have an understanding what's changed with the tax code and how those changes directly affect self-employment sectors. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we'll go into the legal and financial ends of the business. So first things first is the tax reform. So everything that we're going to be discussing today in large part is predicated off of the tax reform. So January 1, 2018, Tax Cuts and Job Act was implemented. Now, the biggest change with the tax code, we no longer have the ability to offset our tax liability with tax deductible expenses operating in self-employment sectors as an individual. If that makes sense, great. It's a huge change. And then if it doesn't at the moment, it will by the end of the webinar. And, legal and financial, starting on the legal side of things. What it is that we're going to be discussing is a specific type of business entity. More particular than that is a specific type of LLC. So everybody wants to write down parent company. So what we're going to be discussing today is your operational parent LLC. This is your operational LLC for your agent endeavor. Okay, so what a parent LLC is an LLC that consists of the most advantageous corporate bylaws. Okay, now there's three advantages of these corporate bylaws. If you just want to jot down numbers 1, 2, and 3. So number 1, write down max asset protection. Okay, so because of these corporate bylaws, you literally cannot have any better asset protection than you do out of a parent company. Okay, so number 1 is max asset protection. Number 2, write down max tax advantages. Okay, so we're going to go into great depths in regards to the parent LLC's operating agreement and the different tax functionalities that consists of. Number 2 is max tax advantages. And number 3, write down max privatization. Okay, so the parent LLC is a privatization entity. Now, what that means is it's not public record who the members of the entity are. So it gives you the maximum anonymity. Okay, so at the very, very top of your corporate hierarchy, you have your operational parent LLC that gives you the max asset protection, the max tax advantages, and the max privatization. And then as you progress with your endeavor, you diversify, you acquire assets, etc. Eventually, you can have other LLCs in place that are owned by the parent LLC. Okay, now the LLCs that are owned by the parent LLC are referred to as subsidiary LLCs. And all that means is plain and simple, it's a corporate structure owned by the parent LLC. Now, the reason why you start your corporate hierarchy out in this capacity is it kills as many birds with one stone as necessary. Okay, just for the very simple fact, every LLC that is now owned by the parent LLC now inherently has the max asset protection, the max tax advantages, and the max privatization. And once again, it kills as many birds with one stone as necessary. Okay, now I know some of you are just getting things started, so I don't want to make this sound more complex than it is. The parent LLC is your operational LLC for the insurance agency, but I also know that Laura's big in the real estate game as well. So there may be some of you that are pursuing other endeavors that eventually will have other corporate structures. And this just allows you to build out your corporate hierarchy from the very beginning in the most seamless, structurally sound way. All right. Now we're going to start on very, very ground level and bear with me in the beginning. It might be a little bit redundant for a few of you. The first things first, the acronym LLC stands for Limited Liability Company, a limited liability company. Now, the very first element in which the LLC does is it legitimizes. It's the legalization that you started a business. Simple concept. I would also like to think that probably all of you would assume that's what the LLC would do right out of the gate, right? Legalize. The reason I bring it up and I emphasize it is once again, the tax reform. Right, state and federal government bodies, they clearly want self-employment sectors sanctioned and bounded by law. So right out of the gate, legalization. Right now, to even add a little bit more on that, to keep it simpler on the legalization element, as simple as that is, it's also in all reality, the gatekeeper to everything. Right, without showing illegal intent since 2018, with a self-employment endeavor, you don't have itemized deductions. Right, so that is what gets you in the game, is showing that legal intent. Okay, now, the fundamental function of the LLC, if anything, this is what you're all probably familiar with. If you want to write down separation and protection, or if you want to get technical about it, you could write down corporate veil of protection. So LLC separates, protects you and all your personal assets from any type of liability associated from the business. Simple as terms, you can't be sued or liquidated personally for something that transpires from the business. That is the fundamentals of every LLC right there. Very first element, legalization, fundamental function, separation and protection. Now, the reason why Laura's partnered up with us as well as where LLCs differentiate from one another is the operating agreement. Okay, the operating agreement is the structure of the LLC. That's how you reap specific benefits and recognition. Okay, that's really what's of importance, and that's what we're going to be diving into now are the functions of the LLC's operating agreement. All right, we on the same page so far? So far, so good. Right, utilize your chat, utilize your audio. Now, the reason why the tax status is so critical, that's what gets you the legal credit of this sector, okay, which in turn gives you up to 250 different tax deductible business expenses, up to 250 different. And we will send everybody the complete list of all the different sanctioned expenses. But just to give an example of a few, all the home-based expenses, internet bills, phone bills, power bills, as long as you have internet connection, you're in a viable position to be operating the business, gas mileage, all tax deductible. Right? And once again, we will send you all the complete list of those different sanctioned expenses. Now, this next function, for whatever it's worth, my personal opinion, without a doubt, the most important function of all, if everybody wants to write down pass-through function. Okay, and I also have a quick question for everybody. If I could just get a response in the chat, please. If you are currently generating income outside of the agency endeavor, if you are pursuing a traditional W-2, other types of 1099, if you have retirement, if you do have other sources of income outside of the agent endeavor, put a 1 in the chat if you do. And then if you do not have any other source of income, put a 2. Right, so if you are generating income outside of the self-employment endeavor, put a 1, and then if you do not, put a 2. I had to sneak some coffee in there. Gotta keep the heart.
You're doing great. We're taking it all in. We'll break it down too, but thank you so much.
And I appreciate the note taking on your end as well, Laura. It's like having the AI assistant recap.
Just the important parts.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, very good. So based off of those responses, 10 times more important is this function for all of you. So I'm going to give you the by the book definition first, then I'll come back, break it down in a way that I find to be a little bit easier to conceptualize. So the pass-through function allows you to legally offset your gross taxable income with all of your business's tax deductible expenses. Simplify, cut out the verbiage. If you just want to write down, apply all deductions against all income. Apply all deductions against all income. So that is exactly what this function allows you to do. So you're now able to apply all of the new business deductions, once again, those 250 different max portion deductions that you have with the LLC, not just against the income that you're generating with the business endeavor, but against your overall gross taxable income across the board, including against the W-2s, all of your 1099s, retirements, if you're married, filing jointly against your spouse's income, against all income. And so huge benefit on a personal level, right? If you were to think about the LLC's tax functions just analytically, it can be nothing more than a tax shelter for all sources of income, right? It just simply gives you additional tax deductions to apply against all sources of income that you would not have the ability of taking without, right? Remember, one of the first statements that I made is you can all make money with your endeavors just by the amount of money that you save on your personal taxes. This is the function that I was referencing there. Okay, now to put some context behind the statements as well as the slide that you're all looking at. So this is an example of an individual who grosses $65,000 a year of personal income. Okay, whether that's W-2, 1099, retirement, it makes absolutely zero difference. But $65,000 a year of personal income. And this individual does not have an LLC. It does not have an LLC that consists of these functions. So with that being said, Uncle Sam comes in, takes at minimum 26%. In other words, the IRS comes in and takes a little over $13,000 away from this individual every year in the form of taxes. Okay, next example, the exact same individual, right? $65,000 a year of personal income. However, this individual does have an LLC that consists of these functions that opens up the gates to the different tax advantages that we're discussing, and they're able to get their tax liability down to a little bit under $8,000. It saves this individual, roughly speaking, $5,500 a year on their personal taxes. It adds up quick. That's 1 year. All right, compound that over the next 5 years. Even take it one step further here. As I just mentioned, you're all making money with the endeavor right out of the gate, and regardless, just by the amount of money that you're saving on your personal taxes. All right, pass-through function, all deduction, that's all income, very, very critical. Okay, and then I have had a couple questions come in. And just to preface this, if I don't stop and elaborate in live time, by no means does that mean that I'm just bypassing it. It just means that it's better served to be elaborated on when I open it up for a Q&A here in a moment. All right, but a great question specifically in regards to this. Nick, is there any way that I can still take advantage of these different tax benefits if I'm not making income with my endeavor? All right, so the question is, do I have to be making and monetizing my business in order to qualify for these tax advantages? No, right? It's not a performance-based concept, right? It's applicable regardless, right? I actually think that it's sometimes easier to make the case that the LLC is of more importance and of more value if you look at it with the glass half empty, right? So let's just do that real quick. So let's say worst case scenarios happen, and for whatever which reason you don't monetize the business. Now, I know that won't be the case because you guys got Laura, but let's just play devil's advocate real quick here. So worst case scenarios happen, you don't monetize. If that were to be the case, 10 times more important is the LLC at that point, just for the very simple fact that's really when you'd want to be recouping your investments come tax season, right? That's really when you want to be applying your new 250 different tax deductible expenses against your personal sources of income, your W-2s, your 1099s, retirements, your spouse's income, your personal sources of income to create that legal tax shelter. You can all start in a surplus just by simply having the proper corporate structure. So make sure that one clicks. Now, the pass-through function works in two capacities. So we understand how it benefits you on a personal level with all of your other sources of income. Also works vice versa. Okay? By having those other sources of income, it also protects your business investments. Okay, let's dive into that, starting with the initial investment that you guys have outlaid for your training courses, softwares, subscriptions, newsletters, anything in that realm, on average about $1,000 to $10,000+, just depending on different facets of servicing that you're all involved with. But the type of investments that I'm exclusively talking on this very moment: training courses, software, subscriptions, newsletters. So these investments are by default categorized by the IRS as educational expenses. Okay, by default categorized by IRS as education. So IRS thinks one of two things have transpired, right? So they think that the individuals, Kimberly, Brandy, Savannah, everybody here, either decided to go back to school and you're not going through an accredited university, or you have upwards of a $1,000 to $10,000+ hobby on your hands. Indifferent to them, personal expenditure. Let's bring the tax code full circle one last time. No longer do we have the ability to itemize as an individual. Okay, so I do emphasize this just because personally find it to be of the more critical on the tax side of things. But with the LLC, these investments are all now 100% tax deductible as a legal business startup expense. 100% tax deductible as a legal business startup expense. That's why Laura had us come meet with the community when we do. So regardless with how we fare with the endeavor, initial investments are protected, right? Most importantly, you've got the proper recognition for what they are. And also keep in mind, that's not just a tax deductible expense that you're itemizing. It's a 100% provision. You want these investments coming back to you come tax season regardless. Okay, now, second to last tax function on the LLC side of things, if you want to write down compliance, earning your compliance. So we obtain the EIN number and the NAICS code that gets you the legal credit of the sector. Okay, all of your different banks, lenders require that this has been obtained. So that's something we get for you as part of the LLC is your EIN and your NAICS code. Okay, now, the other statement that I wanted to bring full circle, I mentioned how you can make money just by saving money, but I also made the reference that every single one of you, just by having the proper corporate structure in place, could save 20% on your taxable income, right? So if everybody wants to write down 20% QBI provision, and Q for qualified, B for business, I for income, 20% QBI provision. So what this provision states is any individual that has interest in a pass-through entity is able to have the first 20% of their business's income tax-free. Right, 20% of the business's income tax-free. So plain simple, if you bring in 100,000, as I mentioned, you're only taxed on 80. Bring in 50, you're taxed on 40. Right? Plain simple, right? Pretty analytical. I don't think I need to elaborate a great deal in regards to the value there, but 20% of your income every year tax-free. And that is the fundamental functions that go into the parent LLC right there. Sound like it resonated with you all well. I got a few good questions I'm going to elaborate with you on here in a moment, and then we can transition to the financial side of things. I've got a few questions in regards to LLC versus S Corp versus C Corp. So let's dive into this, right? So everybody write down those three corporate structures. So those are the three corporate structures that have functionalities: LLC, S Corp, and C Corp. So put a massive X through the C Corp. Okay, so there's nobody here that should be operating a day-to-day business out of a C Corp. Okay, now the reason that I say that is you cannot avoid double taxation with a C Corp. How a C Corp fundamentally works from a taxation standpoint is you're taxed on 100% of the income that your business generates on the corporate tax bracket. You then have to pay yourself out a minimum distribution of 35%, where you're then taxed on all 35% of that on the personal tax bracket, right? So you cannot avoid double taxation. C Corps are meant for big business conglomerates, large amount of shareholders, not day-to-day operational anything, right? So C Corp, never. LLC versus S Corp. Probably the biggest misconception that I come across is this one right here, LLC versus S Corp. Okay, so keep in mind, LLCs and S Corps are identical entities, right? An S Corp is an LLC with a different tax election, right? If you actually really want to get technical about it, an S Corp's real name is a subchapter S LLC. It's an LLC with an S Corp tax election. So the only question that you ask yourself as to whether you want your LLC to be taxed as a LLC or is it to be taxed as a S Corp, one question only: income, right? So if you're netting, not grossing, but if you're netting over $50,000 a year with the endeavor, there's going to be a tax advantage to doing the S Corp tax election. There'll be a tax advantage if you are. And then if you're not netting $50,000+ with the business endeavor, it would actually be a detriment to you from a taxation standpoint. Right. So you make up your mind as to whether you want to do the S Corp tax election when you go to file your taxes based off of nothing more than income. Right. I don't recommend starting with it unless you're already earning that income threshold, just for the simple fact, once you do it, you can't go back, and it's only a value based off of a certain income threshold. All right. Great question. Another good one, Nick, is there any way that I can still get credit for the different investments and expenses that I've made in 2024 and prior to having the LLC in place, right? Prior. So yes, absolutely. So we do a retroactive intent date on the LLC that by default allows you to capture all investments and expenses for the complete calendar year of 2024 from a tax deductibility standpoint. So yes, everything by default is in play for the complete calendar year of 2024 from a tax deductibility standpoint. The caveat to that, well, Nick, with that being said, is there assistance that you can then give me for different investments and expenses that I've made in prior years, 2023 and so forth? So yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel for all of you as well. Right? So just to fill everybody in a little bit on this front, so we do, roughly speaking, about 20,000 tax returns on an annual basis, right? We have in-house CPAs. I personally think that it's a very good idea to get an understanding how we recommend you start keeping records, itemizing, above all, what to be expecting as far as returns go. Right? It's a critical year for all of you from a taxation standpoint. For many of you, 2024 is still a critical year for you based off that retroactive start date, right? I did one little math example that could be the difference $5, $10, $15, $20,000 worth of tax savings just by simply having the right corporate structure in place. So we'll make sure that you have the opportunity to speak to a tax advisor. And of course, I'll explain to you here in a moment what Laura has been gracious enough to cover for you guys. I'm currently operating an LLC taxes as corp filing itemized deduction reporting personal income via K1 on a schedule. Correct, Christopher. Yep, K1. So you don't have a Schedule C with your S corp. You just have a K1 that passes through to your 1040. And then Debbie, that answered that for you. Adam, you're good. I'm currently okay. I answered that. Same thing. I think it's pronounced. Is it Shiaka? Yeah, K1 if you have an S corp. Schedule C if you have an LLC. So in the future, can an entity taxes? Yeah, yep, absolutely, Molly. So just for your guys' personal knowledge, very, very simple to convert the LLC to have the S Corp tax selection to be an S Corp. The form that you file, if you want to write this down, it's a 2553 form. 2553 form. We do it for you. It's free, right? Very, very simple, right? It's a 2553 form.
Good stuff.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, with that being said, we have time still to touch base on the financial side of things, Laura. We're good. Okay, perfect.
Go ahead. Take your time.
So let's transition to the financial side of the spectrum, right? As I made reference earlier, most individuals are not aware, but we have two federally sanctioned credit profiles. Okay, so we have our personal FICO credit profile, which you all are familiar with what that is, your personal credit score, your personal credit profile, right? Our FICO. We can also establish a corporate credit profile with our corporate structure, right? It's referred to as a PAYDEX credit profile. P as in Paul, A-Y, D as in David, E-X, PAYDEX. So what the personal FICO is to you as an individual is what the PAYDEX is to the LLC. Now, a little bit different in nature of the two, the FICO and PAYDEX, that is, just for the very simple fact you're not just inherently given the PAYDEX credit profile with the business. Okay, you actually have to go through certain steps and parameters to establish it. Not rocket science, but a process. Where they also differ is in how they're built. Okay, and let's touch base on the FICO real quick, just because I know that you're all familiar with it. Give us a little bit of bearings more than anything. So number one, as long as you have a social security number, you are inherently given a FICO credit profile, right? Social FICO, FICO social. If you have one, you have the other, right? They're synonymous. Not only that, but how we build our personal FICO credit scores, I think we all probably have a relative understanding. Pay your bills back, pay your borrowers back, score improves, opportunity to borrow more. The FICO, right? Now, the PAYDEX on the other side of the spectrum, being that it's unassociated with you just on a personal level, before the financial institutions are willing to leverage you any type of capital, they want you to prove your credibility prior to receiving it. Okay, prior. If you want to jot this down, so your PAYDEX score ranges from a 1 through 100 rating, 1 to 100 rating. And then if you also want to write down 75 or higher. So having a 75 to 85 at minimum is the goal for any business owner, 75 to 85. Right, then just to give you a little bit of bearings again here. So our personal FICO score ranges from a 300 to 850. PAYDEX, 1 to 100. An excellent rating on the personal FICO score, 700 or higher. Right. Having a 700 to 800 on the FICO is the equivalent of the 75 to 85 on the PAYDEX. Right. Now, the reason why that I say that 75 to 85 marker is at minimum the goal for any business owner, once accomplished, you're now what we refer to as a self-sufficient business. Right? The business is now walking and funding on its own 2 feet, utilizing corporate funds, business lines of credit, capital unassociated with you just personally, right? You want to get away from being the personal bank to the business, right? Even really more than just getting away from being the personal bank to the business, need to get away from being solely personally financially liable for the business. Okay, very easy way to break this down. So think about it in a binary as you're looking at the slide. So on one side, we have personal, that's us, right, that are tied to social security numbers, that are tied to FICO credit profiles, right? Hence why anything that's tied to your FICO is tied to you personally, right? Why you're personally financially liable to it. So personal, social, FICO. Other side of the spectrum, the business, right? So that's our corporate structure, our LLC, that's tied to a EIN, employer identification number. I'm sure many of you have heard that acronym. That's the business's social that's tied to our PAYDEX credit profile. Right? So LLC, EIN, PAYDEX. Those are the equivalents of one another. So you want everything that you're doing in regards to the endeavor from a legal as well as from a financial standpoint to be falling on the LLC linked to the EIN that you're developing the Paydex credit profile off of, right? So regardless of what happens with the business, it doesn't come back and affect you personally, right? There's no limit to how many businesses we can start, how many Paydex credit profiles we can establish and build. One FICO, one social. We don't jeopardize that for something potentially out of the business's hands, right? They gave us two federally sanctioned credit profiles for a reason. Personal, business, right? Separate the two. Okay, now the other thing that I really like to bring full circle here, Laura and everybody for that matter, is the overarching theme, hopefully, of simplicity between the LLC with the tax advantages, but also with the Paydex and getting away from the personal bank. It comes down to just doubling your financial resources, right? I firmly believe every business owner should have an LLC and every LLC should have a Paydex credit profile, right? If they're giving us the ability to having more financial resources, not only more financial resources, but also keep in mind the financial resources that are designed to be utilized for just business. They're advantageous, right? Starting off with interest rates. So on the consumer side of things with your FICO, hence your FICO credit profile is a consumer credit profile. Generally speaking, they start you out on a 0% interest rate for a promotional period of anywhere between about 6 to 12 months, right? After that 0% interest rate promotional period, back to the national average you go, right? 18 to 24% is what that is right now. Personal FICO. Business Paydex on the other side of the spectrum. 0% interest rates for promotional periods, anywhere between 15 to 30 months. After the 0% interest rate promotional period, generally speaking, as low as 2% to 10%, significantly lower, right? And as I mentioned, if you think about it analytically, it makes complete sense. Business Paydex funds designed, utilized for just business. What does business consist of? It's a constant cycle of cash flow. It's a constant influx cycle of cash flow. With that being said, we don't go against the grain, right? And what I mean by that is we don't rob Peter to pay Paul, right? Borrow from Nick, pay back Nick, borrow from Nick, pay back Nick, right? Eventually the bottom falls out. When do we really monetize, right? What we're looking to do as business owners is buy time, right? Hence the term ROI, return on investment. Return isn't something that just always comes instantaneously, right? Buying time isn't the most viable thing, paying 18 to 24%. Right? It is paying 0% for 2 to 3 years, right? 2 to 10% is manageable after. Above all, you do not want that on your personal FICO regardless, right? But that is the Paydex, right? And then the other aspect that's really cool about this for many of you, as you establish it and as obviously you get it built to where you need it to be built to, and also give you guys some time frames here in a second of what you can expect in order to get to an excellent rating. It allows you to also consolidate and shift financial liability, right? So there might be a handful of you that have used like a personal credit card. For like me, you just want points for everything at minimum. If you have a fiance that loves to travel, I think it's your only option. But that being said, maybe you utilize a personal FICO for the training course investments, or maybe you're buying leads on your personal FICO, or maybe you've been making what you can qualify as business expenses on your personal FICO, right? Once you establish your Paydex credit profile, what it is that we're able to do is come in and shift those debts off of the FICO and over it onto the business Paydex. So now your FICOs go back to where they need to be to zero, and it's sitting on your Paydex credit lines and profile that has 0% interest rates for 2 to 3 years, 2 to 10% after. Above all, it's not tied to you personally, right? It has no bearings of your personal FICO, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do in the corporate finance world, right? Corporate finance is obviously very vast, right? But what also hopefully makes it easier for you guys, we all know what our FICO is, therefore we already are familiar with our Paydex. Must you create separate LLCs for two different business models, or can one operate one LLC and have a single diverse model? Right, so separate, you got to separate, right? So what the IRS prohibits is commingling. Right. So what commingling is, Molly, is utilizing one corporate structure to operate two different business endeavors out of. Right. So the LLC needs to be specifically structured for the respective business. Right. The analogy that I kind of use is the vehicle analogy. Right. So the LLC is a car, right? We'll say it's a four-door sedan car, right? And then let's say that an S Corp's an SUV and a C Corp's a motorcycle, right? They're all fundamentally different vehicles in that instance, right? But to take it one step further, not all four-door sedan cars are the same either, right? You can have a fully loaded luxury four-door sedan car. You can have a race car. You can have a four-door sedan car that barely gets around the road. It's still fundamentally a four-door sedan car. That's the same concept with your corporate structures. This is the four-door sedan car, right? The legalization and separation and protection element. Where it differentiates and becomes a value is with the operating agreement. Right. So that's everything that we just got done going over with all the tax advantages is the specific operating agreement, tax status, NAICS code is what opens up the gates to everything it is that we're discussing, not just the fundamental vehicle of the LLC. Right. So let me know if that makes sense. But the same concept and the reason why I brought that up, Molly, is when you go to, let's say that you're right now an insurance agent and you're diversifying, you're going to go become a real estate agent. You'd want two separate structures that are structured for the respective business endeavors. Great question. All right. And it looks like we still have a little bit of time, Laura, right? I just want to be conscientious of that. Okay, perfect. So the other thing that I just want to quickly do, let me switch slides and dive in over here real quick.
I know that this is a lot of information, guys, but it's so good to like kind of wrap your head around just all of the different options that are available and, you know, like taking time to understand not only just the personal and the business, like doing of your taxes and all of that, but just some of the things are available. Like, I mean, for me, I'm using the Amex for my Paydex or my business card. Everything should go on that. That way it is separate, but that's just one small thing. But yeah, if you want to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to that, Laura, I think that a lot of the topics that we discuss here in general are somewhat dense, right? Legal, there's 70,000 pages of the tax code. Needless to say, there's a lot of different methodologies to go about structuring an entity, corporate credit profile. So I think there's somewhat an inherent type of density to what it is that we're discussing. What I really hope is the end outcome of today's webinar is simplicity, though, right? And what I mean by that is make sure that you have an LLC for tax advantages. Make sure you have a Paydex credit profile to get away from the personal bank to the business, right? We don't expect you guys to go become attorneys overnight and go start drafting the corporate structures. It also makes sense as to what Laura has in place for us for this inaugural kickoff webinar with her community. But keep it simple, right? In that sense that everybody who's self-employment should have an LLC. Every LLC should have a Paydex credit profile. Okay, now I'm going to go over some what I refer to as low-hanging tax mitigation strategies, low-hanging fruit tax strategies, right? And this is in particular going to be for the individuals that are already starting to monetize with their endeavors, right? So these tax strategies are all circulated around either reallocating or repurposing certain aspects of everyday life to be incorporated into your business. Okay, so the first one that I want to bring up is the HSA account, right? So the health savings account. Okay, now this is one of my favorite tax strategies just because I personally think that it's the easiest way to 3 times your money just by simply reallocating capital to a different type of savings account. Okay, so just to briefly touch base on the contribution limits with an HSA account. So for an individual, 4,300, for a family plan, 8,550. And obviously that's just based off of your circumstances. Okay, now the reason why I said that it's the easiest way to 3 times your money, how an HSA account works from a tax deductibility standpoint. So when you make your contribution, it's a tax deductible expense. Okay, when you withdraw your capital to pay a medical expense, it's a tax deductible expense. And then when you actually make the literal transaction, it's another tax deductible expense. Right. So the easiest way to 3 times your money just by simply reallocating capital to a different type of savings account. Right. So the health savings account, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's an account that you can get with your insurance provider. You guys are actually probably familiar with it. That is strictly to pay medical expenses. It's as simple as that. But if you can just go form another type of savings account for medical expenses, you can literally come up with an additional 4, 10, 20, almost $30,000 worth of potential tax deductible expenses. Right. So very, very easy way to come up with some additional tax deductions. Another one is the Augusta rule, right? And then for those of you that are golfers, this actually was something that started there. There was a litigation based off of a resident during the Masters where this eventually became a tax bylaw, right? So the Augusta rule. This is for those of you that own your primary residency. Okay, so what the Augusta rule states is that you're able to rent out your primary residency 14 days out of the year tax-free. Okay, 14 days out of the year tax-free. So for example, on the 5th of every month, I have a rental agreement with my business and I rent out my property to my business. Okay, this is where I do all my monthly business reconciling. It's where I do my minutes, my P&Ls, my books, my meetings. I'm feeling good, maybe catering a lunch that becomes tax deductible. But this is where I do all my monthly type of reconciling. Right now, how you actually get the value behind the tax deduction is based off of what's referred to as is a reasonable resort fee. Right. It's based off where you live. So we have a really slick portal where you just like literally enter in your address and it will kick out what the average of resort fee is based off of your proximity. But this deduction on average is anywhere between an additional $12,000 to $20,000 deduction. Right, so that's another one of those big ones that reallocating or repurposing that is a very easy way to mitigate 10, 20, 30, $40,000 for the type of tax deductions. Right. So for those of you that are in those income thresholds, $150,000 plus type, now's the time to start thinking of those things and to make sure that you're forecasting.
Awesome.
All right. And then that being said, Laura, anything else that you want me to touch base on before I just explain to them what it is that you have in store?
Yeah, if you just want to go over some of the ways that they can get help. I know that taxes is extremely overwhelming for a lot of folks. I mean, we've got a lot of everybody on here is a 1099. And having someone that they can go to ask these questions that they can meet with on a regular basis, the things that they don't understand that are going over their head, that they've got that good, solid company to go to. So whatever it is that y'all offer on the very simple, all the way up to, folks that are, making $150,000, $200,000 a year, and have, investments and things like that. What can you offer them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just shared a link and I'll explain to you why I did here in a second. So twofold. So I'll answer that question specifically in the tax side of things. I'm going to bring it full circle though to first explain to them, Laura, what it is that, as I mentioned earlier, you've been gracious enough to do with covering their consultations to speak to one of my corporate advisors. So what Laura has done on this webinar is she has covered an hour-long consultation for each and every single one of you to speak to one of my corporate advisors. Right now, what it is that the corporate advisor is going to be going over in a lot of ways are the topics that we discussed, however, in a lot more depth and circumstantial, right? To make sure that you have the proper corporate structure based off what it is that you need. They'll make sure that you have at very least the fundamental understanding around how to establish a corporate credit profile and get away from the personal links to your business, as well as a tax consultation where you're able to speak to a tax advisor and make sure that you all have a great understanding around record keeping, itemizing, above all, what to expect as far as returns go, right? As I mentioned earlier, it's a critical year for all of you from a taxation standpoint. You have all these new deductions, you have big startup provisions, you have other sources of income. Bottom line is you all have a ton to gain. We want you to know what to expect. Right. So she has covered a consultation for all of you. Right. And even take it one step further. What we're going to do for this kickoff webinar was something that I thought of at the last second, but I think it's necessary just based off of all of you guys being 1099 is rather than paying the retail fees for the LLC that ranges between $1,200 to $1,600 to get your LLC structured, what I'm going to do for every single one of you on this webinar is take care of you on a complimentary LLC. Okay, now what that means is rather than paying the retail $1,660, all it is that you're going to have to cover is the hard cost based off the filing fees in the state in which we structure the LLC out of. Okay, so one more time, the only thing that you're going to be responsible for covering is the hard cost based off the filing fees in the state in which you structure your LLC out of. And for the vast, vast majority, if not all of you, for the insurance side of things, it will be out of your home state, so where you live. Right, so a couple $100 at most, just depending on what state that you live. Right, so I want you to all make sure that you have the proper corporate structures in place to make sure that this upcoming tax year, 2024, you have the best ability to mitigate your taxes and save as much money as you possibly can. But yeah, to Laura's point, all it is that you're covering are the two fees: state filing fee, operating agreement filing fee, right? Those are the only two fees that you have to cover, right? Whether you guys are attorneys or our attorneys do it, those are the fees that you have to cover, but we're going to take care of all of you on a complimentary LLC at the very least. So that was the time, right? If you don't have your corporate structure, make sure obviously that you get it, just so you can take advantage of everything that we just got done going over, as well as for those that have corporate structures. A lot of times we speak to individuals that have a corporate structure. However, they don't really know what it is that they have, right? They went to an attorney years ago, or maybe they just did it through the state themselves and they don't even have an operating agreement. Or maybe they have an operating agreement, but they don't even know what the tax status is. Therefore, they don't even know if it has any type of tax functionalities. This is also the time to consider, if I don't know what I have, somewhat fall in the sort of like I don't have, and get structurally sound now. Or at the very least, you can speak to one of my corporate advisors and they can verify what it is that you have. So make sure that it's extremely informative at the very least. But legal, financial, tax, they're certified on all topics. So whatever it is that you're most eager to dive into is what they're going to do. But at the same token, if you don't have the corporate structure, all the legal, financial, and tax implications are somewhat theoretical. So that's the first place that you all want to start, is on the entity structure side of things if you don't have that. Right. So I did share that link, Laura, in the chat, and everybody, just so you're aware, make sure that you schedule utilizing that link, just because that's what's going to be the signifier to my corporate advisors that you guys are on a specific promotional type of service on the entity structure side of things. So make sure that you do use that link. All right. Any last questions while I've got you all here? You were awesome. I appreciate the interaction and being informative. You guys had a lot of great questions. Is there anything else that I can touch base on before I let you guys go? Laura, anything on your end?
I'm going to share, a couple of other things that y'all have sent me in my chat with them for them to peruse over, just all the different things that y'all help with. I think it's great that if they do have a corporate structure, understanding that and knowing how to use it. I just know that this is so confusing, and for so many years that I haven't been able to say, hey, this is someone that I can refer you to that can kind of break it down. Heck, even with my own self, with my CPA, that before, coming to work with you guys, like I still don't even know what's going on. I'm just like, taking your word for it. And so it's good to have this breakdown, even if a lot of it right now is going over your head. The fact of the matter is that there's all of this knowledge and information that, can be broken down to really help you guys make sure that you're setting up the best way that you can, save as much money as you possibly can, and, do what you like to do, which is to run your business. So I really appreciate your time and all of the diligence that you went into breaking things down. If there is any more questions that come through, let's see. I don't know if we do or not. If this is recorded, I will send it to everybody so you can re-listen, take more notes if you need to. But thank you guys for telling him thank you. We appreciate you. And I think that's it.
That should do it. And then also, just to preface that one-on-one consultation for all of you, it's done via a Zoom consultation. So there'll also be some slides. If you guys are like me, I'm a visual learner for the most part, so you will have some nice slides, but I still recommend very much so undivided attention, as well as something to take some notes with, right? That way, at the very minimum, you have a resource to leave with. Right. So notes, undivided attention, and they'll really, really dive into things, but you got a full hour covered. And like I said, we took it one step further. We're going to make sure at the very least you all have an LLC put in place at an absolute complimentary level, where once again, all it is that you're covering are the two fees: state filing, operating agreement filing. Right. So we look forward to working with all of you. It was a pleasure, Laura. We'll be in communication and have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Happy weekend.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Thanks. All right, guys, it is 9:19. Thank you so much for staying with me past the time. I hope that was beneficial for you. I hope that even if it was, like I said, overwhelming, it's a place where you can go ask questions if you need to, if you want to. And let's go out there and kick some
Hey Laura.
today. Yeah.
Hey Laura. Good morning. How are you doing? This is Alex.
Hi. What's up?
Hey there.
Hi.
Right there near the end, I accidentally got kicked out of the meeting, and when I went back into it, those links that he posted were gone. Can those links get reposted, please, ma'am?
Yes, and I'll send out the recording as well for y'all. Just give me a second. I'll put
Awesome.
it. It's right here. I think Molly just posted it right there.
I
Awesome.
put it in the Titans chat too as well, Laura.
All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate y'all. Have a great day. Ciao.
Thank you guys. Have a great one.